Hello, Mama friends. Welcome back to the Mama Gets It Done podcast. Today, I'm talking with my friend Jen. She is a working mom who also homeschooled her kids, and she helps other moms figure out how they can do the same thing. Even if you're not interested in homeschooling, this conversation with her is literally amazing, and she has some awesome tips on just how to manage life as a working mom. So stick around because you're going to love this conversation. Are you ready to be more productive in your home and say goodbye to the dreaded mom guilt associated with a messy house and chaotic days? Hey, my name's Rachel, and the Mama Gets It Done podcast is for the everyday mom. Yes, even those hot mess moms who just need a little grace and a few tips for getting more done in your day. If you're ready to figure out how to stop hating cooking every night, how to give chaotic days a little more structure, and how to find more time for you in this crazy mom life, then you are in the right place. All right. Hello, mama friends. Today we're here with my friend Jen I should say at Practical by Default. She is this amazing mom who is helping other moms figure out how to homeschool when they're working. And honestly, I never thought that was possible until I saw your stuff. So I'm so excited to talk to you today because I know there's so many women who would love to do that, but just think there's no way. And you have obviously proved them wrong. So I'm pumped to talk to you about that today. I think it's so awesome how you can make that choice for your family and still like work. So Jen, tell me a little bit about yourself and your family just so they can get to know you a little better.
All right. As you said, my name is Jen McKinnon. I have been married for 21 years, and my husband and I have two children, 19 and 17. And I have the coffee addiction to prove it. We live in Nova Scotia, Canada. It is currently not snowing, just for those of you who are wondering. It is only September, but sometimes we do get snow. Although my husband makes fun of me because I'm like, it's always cold. But we do get summers, and we are surrounded by the Atlantic Ocean, which I often take for granted. I'm going to be honest. The ocean is like 15 minutes away from me.
Oh,
And so
that's so
it really
nice.
messes with my head when I'm talking to friends of mine who live in other parts and like, I'm going to the beach. I'm like, okay, I'll call you later. They're like, I'm going to be gone for 4 days. I'm like, what do you mean?
Yes, that is very different where I'm in Kentucky. And yeah, you got to drive at least 10 hours, I would say 10 to 12 to get to any kind of like real ocean beach. Like we've got lakes here with man made beaches, but
Mhm.
there's no ocean anywhere close to that. So that is definitely, I'm sure I've seen your stories on Instagram and I'm always like, oh.
I do. I love the sound of water. Although I will admit our oceans are freezing cold. Like
Hmm.
you do not get in the water here until June, maybe if you're like super brave. And now that it's like September's the best, but then the water's warmer than the air, so you get out and you freeze.
Hmm.
So the
Oh my.
swimming window is very short, but I love just like sitting on the beach. I'm drawn to as part of self-care is just to like listen to the ocean.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love it. I love it. Okay. So how did you get started with this whole homeschooling thing? Were you already working or I can see that maybe there's a story here. So tell me about it.
All right. So before I begin, I want you to know that I don't believe that homeschooling is for everyone. I just don't. I feel like every parent should make the right choice for their child. And sometimes that choice for that child is public school, private school, road schooling, whatever. And I'm saying this because I know a lot of moms and parents are stressing about like making the right choice. And the truth of the matter is that you can make a choice and you find that life changes because it always does, and you have to make a different choice, and that's okay. And so the reason I start that story with that is because I was never going to homeschool. No way. I don't have patience, and my son, he's the oldest, and as soon as he could talk, he was one of those children, and maybe you have one, so you can feel me here, where everything had to be exact. So if I said I was leaving at 9 and I left at like 9:05, he would say, actually, we left at 9:05.
Ooh.
And he is 19 now, and that has not changed. just to let you know. So if you're in that phase, just hang on. It might get better, or you might gain some skills and patience that you did not know you had. So I was not going to homeschool him because he was very strong willed. Don't know where he gets that from. Um, I was more than happy to put him on the bus. But what happened is because I was a stay at home mom, I read to him like from the moment I was pregnant. Read to him, played with him. We did colors, we did numbers, we did all the fun stuff. We played outside. And then I had a sister, so they're 22 months apart. And he never stopped. He was always one of those kids that was always on the go. So we took him to school, the school here, and he went through. So I don't know what it's like where you are. And you have to think this is 14 years ago. So obviously things have changed.
Mhm.
Um, but they don't do like skipping ahead or keeping kids back at that time. Whatever age your child is, that's the grade they go in and they stay there no matter if they're advanced or falling behind or whatever, they just get pushed through the system at that time. And there was about 45 kids in his kindergarten or primary class. So I take him to meet the teacher, goes through like an eye test, whatever. I'm filling out paperwork and she comes to me and she's like, there's a problem. And I'm like, okay, you know, what are you telling me? And she said, he can read and write. I was like, yep. She's like, none of the other kids in his class can. She's like, if he stays in my class, he's going to be bored and he's going to be a troublemaker. Which, by the way, you should never tell someone's parent that their kid's going to be a troublemaker when they're 4. I did not take that kindly. I was like, excuse me.
Wow. Yeah,
And
I
she's like, I
wouldn't have
mean this.
either.
Yeah. She's like, I mean this in the best. And I want you to know that I absolutely love this teacher because she set me on a course that I never would have picked for myself. So I don't hold anything against her. You know, I understand she had 45 kids in her class. They all learn in a different way, at a different speed. She was by herself at that time. They didn't have aides. And she was going to have this kid that knew everything that she was supposed to teach him. Like, what is she supposed to do with him?
Wow.
So
So
she
there's
said,
45 kids in one class?
there was at that time. I think they've changed
Wow.
it now, which I'm
Yeah.
so glad because I have a friend who teaches preschool and she has like 3 helpers for 25 kids. And I'm like, I'm so proud of you because, I
Yes.
can't imagine being in that situation. Um, so she said I should homeschool, and I told her she was out of her mind. And I went home and told my husband, and he's like, just try it. And I was like, no, you don't understand. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to teach, and I will probably lose my ever loving mind with this child. And, we tried it for a month and I did everything wrong. So, anyone who's homeschooling will laugh at this next part because I had home very set up very much like public school, which is not the way to do it. I had them raising their hand, they had to ask to use the bathroom because I didn't know what I was doing. I was just like, okay, we're going to do public school at home. And so did that for a while because I didn't have any other, the one homeschooling friend I had finished, her son graduated. The other one was moved away. So I didn't have anybody. And so, I had to figure it all out on my own. But we made it and we fell in love with it. And we just kept, every year I would ask the kids, do you want to try public school? And they would say no. And so we just kept going. So, no, I started working a few years into our homeschool. So I was already homeschooling when I
Gotcha.
started.
So you kind of probably have that drive to be like, look, this is working for us and we need to keep making it work for us.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what happens when you homeschool your kids is that in the homeschool system, um, in the public school system, you are a grade based on your age. So it doesn't matter, if you're maybe really good at math and really bad at science. But in
Mhm.
homeschool, you adjust for the child's learning. So it makes it a little bit more difficult to make that transfer from homeschool to public school.
Yes, I'm
You
sure.
know, So if you have a child who learns in a certain way and the public school system won't teach them in that way, it makes them I mean it can be done. I don't want to like discourage anyone from doing that. You can totally do it. It just takes, a little adjusting. Your child may be ahead of their other classmates in some things and they may be a little behind where their classmates are. So for example, in math, you might do a mastery approach, which means you teach until the child learns it. and you
Hmm.
don't move on until they've mastered that. Well, in schools here, they don't do that.
Yeah,
Right?
no
Grade
way.
one is whatever, grade two is whatever. And if your kid doesn't get it, too bad, because they
Yes.
can't, right? They've got all these kids, they've got to move them through the system and they have to keep it organized. So, once my kids kind of got in that groove and they liked having choices. I mean, what do you want to learn about? Who wants to give up that control if
Yeah,
you get to
right.
pick, right?
Well, and especially too, how long do you guys homeschool every day?
Oh gosh, it depended on the ages and what I was working. And, um, you know, the problem with that question is your children are always learning, whether
Yeah.
they're sitting down or not. Right. So when people say, how long did I homeschool? I always took that as the formal lessons when my kids were, well, not really sitting down, but we'll call them sitting down, working through a lesson. So when they were little, it might take like an hour, 2 hours, because they can't concentrate any longer than that. And you would do it in like 30 minutes, right? You might read for 30 minutes, and then you might have them run around the house. And then you might, bake something, because baking and cooking is, as you know, teaches so many skills, right? Reading, teamwork, math,
Hmm.
science. You can work in geography and history depending on the recipe. As they got older, like when my kids were in high school, they would do 4 or 5 hours,
Yeah.
because they had to do the research, they had to read the book, they had to do.
Yeah.
So it depend.
But that is still so much shorter than your 8-hour school day where, they are learning I mean, they've got all their classes and stuff, but there's a lot of time in between too that you're waiting and waiting on like somebody else to do something. Like there's a lot of waiting around in normal schools, I feel like, which is kind of fun because then you get to chat and stuff. But it's not like they couldn't have a social life still because they had all day. Like I'm sure, but they had all day to like go do other things that they wanted to do. I'm not sure that I would have wanted to change either if I had been that way.
Yeah, especially, my kids are a little bit like me. I like control, I like choices. And so, I mean, don't get me wrong. There were days where I was like, you have to do this. And they're like, no. I'm like, okay, you can do English or you can do science, but you're doing something.
Oof.
So, I mean, it wasn't like, parenting's not easy. And so homeschooling is really an extension of parenting.
Yes,
So,
absolutely. So, how did you make that transition when you started to work? How did you make that transition to like actually working and homeschooling at the same time?
so I failed big time.
Oh, don't we
Like,
all? Don't we all?
yeah, and it wasn't until a couple years ago, because as parents, we're always learning. As humans, we're always learning, right? Um, and that's one of the things I tell parents when they come to me and they go, "Aren't you scared you're not going to be able to teach your kids all the things?" And I'm like, "No, because I'm not going to be able to teach my kids all the things." Like 2 years ago, how many of us were using Zoom? A few, but not many. Now our 5-year-olds know how to use Zoom, and it's not because we taught them; it's because they taught us, probably.
Definitely.
Okay. So, um, you know, I didn't learn about the mental load of a mom. Like, I didn't know it had a name. So when I was home, I was a stay-at-home mom and I homeschooled. So I handled, the housework, the grocery shopping, the errands, teaching the kids, clothing the kids, laundry, all the things. And so when I returned to work, so I had to go back to work because, well, my kids like food and clothing. I know, they're so selfish.
Right? Lord.
And so I thought nothing had to change, like nothing in our school. So all of our homeschool work was very had me involved. I would prepare the lessons. I would make sure there was a lot of hands-on for me. It took a lot of time, but that was okay because I was home. So I worked outside the home when I first began, and a lot of people think that's a lot harder than working at home, and it actually each I've done both. I'm doing both. They both have their pros and cons. There's kind of that freedom of walking out the door and shutting it behind you and not looking at the dishes and the laundry and all that stuff.
Yes.
But I had to get up, take my kids to childcare. I had to pack lunches. I had to figure out how they're going to do their homeschool when I'm not with them. How was I going to keep in touch with them if they had problems or got stuck? And so I would do that. I would get up. We had one car. We live in the country. So I get up, pack up the kids, take my husband to work, come home, depending on when my shift work, because I worked in retail. So that meant that my shift could be early in the morning or in the evening. So if I worked in the afternoon, I would homeschool in the morning, and then I just flip it if it was the other, if I worked in the morning. And sometimes, I would be doing homeschool lessons with the washer going and, vacuuming in between and trying to figure out meals. And what happened is I got really sick. And I don't know if you guys have blackout periods in retail in the States, but it's like a time where you cannot book work off.
Yes, we do. Definitely.
So you're not allowed. And I didn't know I had like a serious sinus and throat infection. So my throat like closed out. I was really sick, and it was during the USA Black Friday, which Canada has adopted so nicely. And so our lineups were like, and I was a cashier, so you couldn't leave. And I was like to the point where I was passing out. I was so sick. So I go see my doctor, can't get into him. So I go to this like night, our medical system here is different from yours, but we have like a night clinic. So I go, and it ended up being my family doctor. And he's like, why didn't you come see me? And I'm like, well, I can't get time off work. And every time I could get time off work, you were packed. And he's like, you need to stop working. You need to go home. I'm like, can't stop working. I need something to get me through. Like, I have to stand this cash for 8 hours.
Yeah.
So, anyways, we went through all this. 2 months later, I just lose it in my house, like bawling. My poor husband, like, because I've never said anything. I never said, like, I just assumed he saw all the things that needed to be done. And why was he not helping me? So we obviously needed communication help. I
I
needed to
like
learn.
I feel this on a molecular level. Like I know exactly what you're talking about. I'm sure, and everybody else I'm sure knows exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. And I share this not to like totally humiliate myself, but because I know there's moms out there. I know that there's one mom out there who feels overwhelmed, like they're drowning, like they have to do all the things, like nobody gets it. Whether you're a working mom, homeschooling mom, doing both, there is so much on our plates. If mom doesn't do it, it doesn't get done. And so I didn't have support. I didn't have systems. I didn't have tools. I didn't have this thing called self care that I never heard of. And so from that moment, my husband was like, okay, you have to tell me this. How can I help? So we started like working through it. And it's from that point moving forward, life got so much better. He started doing the grocery shopping, which was interesting at first. There were days we had cereals because we ran out of things that he didn't know we needed.
It's a
Which are
learning
fine,
process. It is not something we just know how to do.
right?
It is definitely a learning process.
Exactly. There were days where, the kids, all of a sudden, I realized like my mom was a single mom and she raised us to do things because she had to. And I was like, my kids had learned, because they were at that age where like dishes were fun, but they weren't really helping. They were more like making a mess when they learned to do dishes, right? But now they're at the age where their help would actually help. And I had stopped asking for help because it was just quicker, easier, faster for me to do it myself. So I really had to change my mentality that it was okay if dishes stayed in the sink or if the dishwasher wasn't loaded properly and only half the dishes got washed. Okay, fine. I had to be okay with walking out of the house and it not being together or just going to bed because I was tired and letting my husband put the kids to bed. Because in my mind, it was like they wouldn't, because I didn't want my kids to remember me as the mom who's always sick and always working. So I had to really make those changes so I could be present and just like leave the dishes and go play with my kids or leave the laundry. And, you had to pick your battles every day. And, I'd like to say that choice changes, but you just get better at making the decision. You still have to make that decision because you can't have it all. I get asked that all the time. How do you do it all? I'm like, I don't. Would you like a tour of my house? And
Right?
in that moment, and sometimes as working moms, we have to pick our work over our kids. And you have to be okay with that. Like it's really okay. Our kids will understand that you have a deadline and you have to hit that. And when you're done that deadline, maybe the next day you spend the whole day with your kids and you don't do any work. And that's where I think the real balance comes in.
Yes.
for moms.
Yes. Oh, that's what we are all about. Like when because owning your own business and me working from home all the time, I'm like working at weird times. And sometimes I have to sit down and put out a fire, like, because I am the fire putter outer. So um and I have to interrupt like what would usually be our family time or something like that. But they know that when that other time is set aside and like I can actually sit down and be with them, like I'm going to be with them
Mhm.
instead of, be like doing all the other things that I could be doing. It definitely is like picking the time and just choosing like that this like real together time is going to be way better than like a halfway together me with you all the time.
Mhm.
That makes any sense whatsoever.
Yeah, well, it's so true. I have so many moms who work outside the home who are like, I want a at-home job. And I'm like, working at home is great. Don't get me wrong. I love not getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning. But you're home all the time. And so when mom is home to the kids, mom is available.
Yes.
And now you have this whole new obstacle. I kind of feel weird calling my kids an obstacle, but challenge, I guess, is that I had to learn to set that boundary. And this is my office. So as you can see, it has no doors or walls. So
Mhm.
I couldn't like go in my office and close the door when they get old enough to be left by themselves. Like I had to literally teach them, train them how to work independently without me, how to leave me alone for 30 minutes. Just give me 30 minutes, please. And,
Right?
I did that through trading off. I would say, okay, I'm going to set a timer. And I started small, like 5 minutes. And,
Mhm.
just, and, as a business owner, you create these lists of tasks of things you can do in 5 minutes as you train your kids, right? So you're like, okay, I'm going to give it.
Mhm.
And then I would give my kids 5 minutes. But if they interrupted me, I had to set like, okay, if you interrupt me, I have to start the timer over and it cuts into art. And people will say, oh, you sound so mean. And I'm like, maybe, but you have to set those boundaries. And I had to set boundaries with my family because if you're home, they're like, oh, can you take the kids? No, I'm working. But you're home. Yes, I work at home.
Mhm.
And even to this day, and I've been doing this for, 5, 6 years now, I still have family members who call and I'm working. I had to get to the point where I don't answer the phone. If it's an emergency, text me.
Yes.
And you have to set those boundaries or you'll get nothing done,
Yeah.
whether you're homeschooling or not, right?
Yeah.
It's just like,
Absolutely.
yeah.
They're so important. And two, I think um showing your kids that you like putting those boundaries up for you and your children, that's just teaching them how to have a productive life in their adulthood. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think they need to see that mommy knows how to prioritize and mommy is setting boundaries for her sanity and her mental health. Like, there's
It makes you a
nothing
better
wrong with that.
mom,
Yes,
right?
they
Like,
do. Like, if I am so stressed out because my kids have been bugging me every 5 minutes while I'm working, I am not going to be happy when we get to our me time. I'm going to be stressed and overwhelmed. And
yeah,
by setting those boundaries, I can like actually be with my kids and be happy to be with them versus being stressed out over all the stuff that I didn't get done.
right.
So, yeah,
Exactly.
absolutely. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Um, so, okay. So, what does your usual day look like? I know we've talked about it a little bit, but like kind of walk us through your schedule right now, anyways, with your kids and your work and everything.
All right. So it's really strange to talk about this now because both of my kids have graduated.
Wow.
So I know I
Yeah,
feel weird.
I can
um,
imagine.
so my son graduated about 2 years ago. And it's really funny because, as parents, we want our kids to do whatever it is they want to do. Right? You want to give them all the skills and stuff of whatever they want to do. And so he decided to go right into the workforce. So he got a job, and every morning he gets in the car and drives away, and he goes to work for the morning. And then my daughter, she was in school because they're 22 months apart, but in level like grades, they were only a year because of the changes here. So she decided to do a half year. So she wanted really long days to get everything done and graduate by January because she had medical surgeries and stuff coming up. She wanted to be doing school through that. So I'll give you our schedule for last year because this
That'll
year is
work.
more of like this year is a lot of driving to medical appointments and trying to work around that because our
Yes.
medical appointments are about 2.5 hours away, and we go like every week, and we
Oh,
have like
wow.
some here, so it's a little chaotic.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
But
absolutely.
last year, so by the time they're in grade 11, my kids were I was very fortunate that they are very goal oriented, very self driven. I never, when they were younger, they went through a phase in their teenagers where, they wanted to sleep in. I was like, fine, as long as you get your work done by Friday, I don't care. And then if they didn't get their work done by Friday, they had to give up their weekends with their friends to do the work. And if they chose, to fight me on that, we had our work schedule, our homeschool schedule, so they were done and they would have like 3 months of summer off. But
Wow.
the only way they did that is if they buckled down and did the work. So sometimes they got 3 months off and sometimes they got 1 month off, depending on what they did. So I really let them have a lot of control there. So she would get up, I would get up and grab my planner, grab my coffee, figure out what I was doing for the day, whether I was working at home, was I working outside the home, did I need the car, what was for supper, that type of thing. She would come out, we would kind of go over the plan for the day, when did you want to do your studies, what course, because sometimes they had classes outside the home, sometimes they had, classes, online classes. We would just kind of set it up, and then she would just dive in, and they, by this age, they made their own breakfast. We would meet at lunchtime, even though I worked at home, and she knew, when I could be interrupted and when I couldn't be. So when I really set those clear boundaries, like if you need me, even if I'm in a video, stand behind the camera where they can't see you
Yeah.
and wave, right? And I would look up and be like, okay, like 1 minute, 5 minutes, and I would kind of like try to do it. The joys of working at home, right?
Yes.
Or, we had a pile. So I had a clipboard where they would put their work. If you need me to check it, put it here. If you're stuck, you know, s- slap a sticky note on it and we'll discuss it as soon as I'm done. So it was a lot of like time blocking. For 30 minutes, I would do this. For 15 minutes, I would check with her. For 30 minutes, I would do this. For 30 minutes, she might need me for a lesson or whatever. So basically, that was like my routine for the day. It really depended. It's really hard for me to share because I work outside the home. So sometimes I would have to get up and go, and I
Hmm.
wouldn't be home for like 5 or 6 hours. So I get up, get the car. Again, we're still a one car family. So I take my son to work, take my husband to work, come home, get changed. She was old enough to stay here. So I check with her. I'd go to work, come home, go get them, come home. A lot of running.
Wow.
Um, but we picked, our grocery day was Saturday, meal planning was Sunday. Saturday and Sunday, I tried to limit my business work and save that for family. I always tried to take like a Saturday afternoon to do a hike or, go to just go spend that time together. And I always made sure, because I think one of the hardest parts of being a working mom as your kids get older is to have that strong connection. And so every day, and this may sound kind of weird, but I would write down on my planner when I was going to be with my kids and what we were going to do. And it could be
Mhm.
anything like cook together, do a homeschool lesson together. Because my son and I are very similar, so we don't always get along. And so I really had to work on my relationship with him because he's quiet. He doesn't like talk. So if anything's going on, he's not going to tell me, right?
Uh-huh.
So where my daughter and I are close in a different way, where we chit chat and we watch baking shows together and we play video games together. My son and I were not the same. So we would like go for a walk down the road, which he hated, but he would come if I asked him. Or I'd go for a drive, or I would do a lesson with him, or I'd just go sit on his bed. And he's like, "Why are you here?" And I'm like, "I'm going to tell you about my day." And so I would just tell him about my day. This is the technical problem I was having. I got this button to work on my website. And they were interested. And so he would listen. And then eventually he would tell me. And so I made sure that I had at least 30 minutes a day, which does not sound like a lot. But when you're looking at everything, to protect for that for him. And, sometimes it would be 10 minutes because he'd be like, I don't want to talk. And, when he's 16, 17, you kind of have to respect that too, right?
Mhm.
So that's kind of, you know, um, how it worked. My husband and I would make sure that we did the groceries together. So that would be our date. And we would go to the gym together. We would drive to the gym together. He'd go do his thing, I'd go do my thing, and we drive back. And that was kind of our time to like have that communication that was so missing in the beginning. I
Yes.
would say, look, this is what's coming up. And I didn't expect him to remember everything because as moms, we kind of tend to have that mental list, that mental load. But I'd say this is what's coming up, this is where I need help. How are you doing? Check in with him. It was really important so that we kind of were on the same page. He's not into planning at all, and I am. So I'd often have to like run the weeks. This is what's going on this week. This is what's going on tomorrow. This is what I need the car. This is what I need you to do. So
Yes.
it was really important.
Absolutely. That is something that me and my husband are absolutely still working on, but the pandemic all has actually made it to where we finally started like really getting together and like working on the household stuff together. And we actually started like a family calendar that we both put things on in our phones. So before we plan anything, we're like, okay, even if it's a work meeting or anything, because now that my husband works from home all the time now, most of the time he may go into the office every once in a while, but we got to the point where even before like work stuff, like he's checking out, he's like, okay, let me check because sometimes he has to go get the kids, or like sometimes I have to be gone and he will have to do dinner, or like just random little things like that. We actually just ran into this weekend. My sister-in-law asked me, she goes, will you go shopping with me and go get a pedicure on Saturday? She's about to have a baby. Like she's like weeks away from having a baby. I was like, oh, I love that. And I was like, let me check our schedule. Like, let me check it. And so I look, there's nothing on it. And I was like, oh, perfect. This is great. And so I go. And then later that day, of course, I didn't put it in the calendar that I was going. Then later that day, I'm telling my husband, I'm like, oh, I'm going to go Saturday with your sister and we're going to go do this. And he goes, what time on Saturday? And I was like, probably around 9. And he was like, did you look at the calendar? I said, yeah, there was nothing on it. And he goes, oh. Apparently, like literally 2 hours after I had talked to her, he had went and put in something he wanted to do at 9 a.m. on Saturday. So it was like we are really relying on that for a lot of our communication right now. And so obviously we hit a little snag there, but we figured it out. But it like that we were like miles ahead of where we used to be when we're like, oh, what's going on? Like we weren't trying that, because like before it would have been that morning we would have been like, I'm doing this, well I'm doing this, and then we're like, oh, what are the kids gonna do? Like, you
Exactly,
know,
because you can't just like shove them on a shelf and be like, stay.
unfortunately, yeah. Oh man. Oh,
Yeah.
I love it. Okay. So I know you talked a little bit about like blocking, like when you're talking. So what kind of scheduling system do you use to keep your sanity? So I'm very curious.
So planning is like one of my favorite things to talk about. And it's really funny because until I went through that story that I told you earlier about burning out, I didn't use a planner.
Mhm.
I just had like the sheet of like, this is my work schedule. And I knew hit my husband's because it stayed the same. And, the kids, it's just, and I think that would have really helped because my planning system is literally my brain as I've gotten, I don't want to say older, let's just say tired. I just find my brain won't hold it, right? Like I can't keep
Yes.
track of all the things. And especially with all these medical appointments of like, where do I have to be? When do I have to be? How long does it, and working in like that 2 hour drive before, a 2 hour drive afterwards. And sometimes it takes us 2 hours to get through the appointment. So there's 6 hours of my day. So I use a paper planner and I created my own. So I run a membership and this is like, I'll just open that's and so it's just like a printable. Can you see? Probably not. So it
There
has
we go.
like
Yeah, I can see it now.
the monthly and then it has blocks. And so one thing I'll tell you that if you find a paper planner that does not work for you, like isn't organized right, get stickers because you can create
Mhm.
your own blocks
Mhm.
and your like checklists and stuff. And it's a great way. So I use a paper planner and I use Google Calendar. So I use a combination of both because I need Google Calendar for the reminders.
Amen.
Yeah, they are necessary. And so The thing is, though, I find with an online planner calendar, no matter which one I've tried, is that I can't get an overview enough. Like, if something comes up and they're like, okay, what are you doing Wednesday? And it's just usually like a day, or you have to like scroll through, where on paper planner, I can just glance at the week and be like,
Hmm.
this is what's going on. So the way I set up my planner is I put in anything with a deadline or time attached to it first for the week. So if I have like this podcast, or if I have like a medical appointment, or if I have a deadline, anything. So those go in first. And those are what I call my fixed items, because they can't be changed
Yes.
usually.
Yeah.
Like, you get some control over certain things, but usually it's like, if your boss says you need this done, you don't get to say, I don't feel like doing it that day. Can we move it? He'll say, sure, you're fired. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so those go in first. And then, because homeschooling is very flexible, and that's why you can work in homeschool, because your kids, they don't have to learn at 8 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Like I said, we flip flop the schedule. We did a lot of afternoon homeschooling. We did a lot of weekend schooling. We did a lot of holiday schooling, and then we would book our holidays at another time. And so, because your homeschooling can move around, that gets worked around those blocks that can't be moved. And then self care is like my third important block, because I learned that 5 minutes of self care 3 times a day is like doable when people are really, really busy and overwhelmed. And it makes more of a difference than you think. If I can encourage mom, just try it for like a month, try for a week, and then try for a month and see the difference. Like, it's incredible what those 5-minute breaks, and they don't have to be like big, elaborate jacuzzi baths, which would be nice. But
Yes.
it could be like 5 minutes of silence, or just like sitting on your doorstep while the kids like destroy the house,
Hmm.
and just like breathe and let it go, because your brain is going all the time as moms, and we have this mental list, and just like learning to like have those mental breaks are so important. So that's always in my planner. I always just write in like, this is what I can do in 5 minutes. This is what I can do in 10 minutes for me. And I quit. So I have a quitting time. That's my other secret.
I
People
love
are
it.
like, what? And I'm like, oh yeah. Yeah, yeah. Especially when the kids were small, because kids that are small learn to say dad first, but then they learn to say mom, and they never stop saying it.
Oh my gosh, that's so true.
They're like, mom, 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 where's this? Mom, mom. I'm like, I don't know. Okay. So you need that. Like, I would tell my husband, I would say, what? I need like 30 minutes. So I'm going to go in my bedroom, and I would tell the kids, for the next 30 minutes, I quit. I'm not here. I'm not doing dishes. I'm not getting you a drink of water. I'm not getting you a snack. Your dad is right there. Or you can just wait. You're not going to starve to death in 30 minutes. If you can't find a snack and you can't find your father for 30 minutes, you're not going to die. And I would just go in my room and shut the door. And sometimes that might be like a nap. Sometimes it might be me just staring at the ceiling, or watching a show, or listening to a podcast, or learning something, whatever recharged me at that moment. But that was like, yeah, had to be on my schedule. Now it's not so much, because, my kids are older. They both work. So I get a little bit more free time. But
Yes, definitely. Yeah, yeah, that's definitely something that I learned the hard way 2 different times. Like both times, I made the same mistakes when I had both my kids in like the first year of their life. I just did not, I just was, you know, zeroed in and focused on baby, and never took time for myself, never did anything. Like I would, at the end of the night, I would lay there and scroll on my phone, but that didn't, it was really important to know, like what you said, that did not refill me. Like, yeah, I was sitting there and I was scrolling, but it didn't do what I needed it to do. And so like I kind of discovered that after the first year of my daughter's life. She was my first, and then afterwards I fell into the same trap with my second. And then it was really like, I was like, crap. Like I did snap out of it a little faster, but I was like, no, I need to do this for me, like, and for them, for both, for all of us. It's important.
yeah, because like I mentioned, I don't have patience.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm
very much so. I'm the type of person that, and my husband's like, oh, when you ask me to do something, you expect me to do it right away. I'm like, well, yeah.
yeah.
Otherwise, I wouldn't be asking you. And
Woo.
with kids, it does not work. It sometimes doesn't work with my husband either. That's another story. But when I'm stressed, overwhelmed, drowning, fried, what other little patience I've developed over the years goes out the window.
Mhm.
And so because they didn't do it, I feel like I have to do it. Like take out the trash. Oh, I can't. Fine, I'll just do it. And so, I start like this manic rushing around the house doing all the things. And that's like my okay. Have you sat down for 5 minutes? Have you taken that time? Because I don't like, so I know I'm a better wife, mom, friend, daughter if I take that time. So I had to flip it that way in my mind as I wasn't doing it for myself, I was doing it for them.
Yes.
And so once I kind of got used to that, then I realized that I could do it for myself and that was okay. But
Mhm.
I was raised in that time frame where like moms didn't do things for themselves. So that was like a really big mindset thing to overcome. That it was
Yes.
okay. So when I'm talking to other moms, I'm like, you are allowed to have feelings. You are allowed to express those feelings. And you are allowed to sit on the floor and cry if that makes you feel better. It's okay. We all do that.
Yes. Whether you hear it out of someone's mouth or not, they have absolutely all had a like crying meltdown over something in their life with their children and the overwhelm that comes with it. Like, heck yes, I have. Like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah. Yeah. That's why systems and tools and support are so important because
mhm.
even with those things, we have those breakdowns, but they come, they're not as often, or we know how to like regroup and get going again. Where before that would put me in a tailspin for days of like, I was the worst mother, I was a failure, who thought I could raise kids, who thought I'd be able to work, and I would get into this mental like state and it would take me days to pull myself back out. And of course, I
Yes.
wasn't telling anybody. So because that was shame and
Mhm.
guilt, and good moms didn't break down.
Oh,
And so
yes.
if
I,
if we can get, I feel like it's important that moms know that, yeah, they do.
yeah.
They do. And it's okay.
Yep. Absolutely. Oh my gosh. This is awesome, Jen. I'm so excited that like we got to like really sit down and like talk through this because I think it's so important for moms to know that. And so even regardless of how busy you are or like all of the other things going on in your life, those 5 minutes of you time is worth it. Like it can
Yeah.
save you. Like so important.
Yeah.
Um all right. Let's see. So I did have another one on here, and I know so there are all kinds of like to change we're flipping this a little bit, but I know I'm sure you've experienced it. There are some negative connotations that come with homeschooling, and
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, I'm sure you've heard it all at this point. You've been doing it for years. So, and I feel like and I grew up with some of my very best friends were homeschooled, and I even have my nieces and nephews are homeschooled. Like it's very much a part of our like we are with and love people who homeschool here. But I felt like during the pandemic, I really saw a change in the way that people viewed that simply because they had to have their kids home and go through, even though I don't think, at least this is my opinion, anyways, that it wasn't true homeschool because you didn't get to pick anything. You still had to follow the school.
Yeah.
But did you feel like a change in people's perspective or their attitude towards homeschooling during that or anything? It was just an interesting thought that I thought we might chat about.
I love this question. And I first want to say that when the schools shut down and everybody got sent home, my heart was just breaking for these parents because we got to choose.
Mhm.
Right, we get to decide. We got to decide. Do I want to work? Do I want to homeschool? Do I want to do this with my kids? We had time to. Well, I didn't research, but other parents did. They researched. They got. You guys didn't. You were
Mm.
literally like thrown in the deep end and on someone else's schedule. Right. So you didn't get the benefits of like deschooling and letting go of that like public school mentality because you couldn't. Your job was to stay up with the school. And, so I run a community on Facebook that's free and it doubled in size within like 2 weeks. There were so many moms that were like overwhelmed. Most of them obviously were working. They had two or three kids, two or three computers. They had to be online at all these different times. It was heartbreaking. And I felt really bad because that's not what homeschooling is about. It
Hmm.
can be, and it totally works for some families and certain types of children, but most children are not. That's not ideal for them to sit in front of a computer all day. It's not ideal for us to sit in front of a computer all day. We have to get up, we have to move. And so, but it was eye opening. The positive spin that came out of that is so many working moms realized that there's freedom in homeschooling compared to that, and that they could make it work for their kids. And so there were so many parents that came in and they're like, my kids need to be homeschooled. I never thought I could do it. And even though this was far from perfect, it made me realize that I could do it. And so that
Wow.
was really nice. That was like empowering because like, not everyone wants to homeschool. I get that. But, it's sometimes it's best for your kids. And as moms, we do what's right for our kids, even when it's hard, even when it's difficult. And so to have these moms know that there is support there, that there are those of us who've been doing this for years that are more than happy to help. Um, and that it's possible was really nice because a lot of people, they wanted to do this, but they just couldn't figure it out. If you leave the home at 8 and you don't get home till 5, what are you going to do with your kids?
Hmm.
Especially if they're older, childcare centers will only take them up to a certain age. And
Yes.
so, childcare is always the first obstacle. And then you have like the what am I going to teach them and how am I going to teach them when I'm at work? And so, I've even to this day, I have people that come to me and go, well, yeah, those people work at home. And I'm like, actually, we have vets and doctors and nurses that work 12-hour shifts that homeschool their kids. And so, it's where that I find working moms that homeschool really take advantage of the flexibility and the fact that our kids are always learning. But that's like the biggest change in with the pandemic I found. And personally, I discovered because before the pandemic hit, if you had come to me and you said, okay, what's the one thing you need? I would say, oh, a planner. You need a planner. You need a planner to keep track of all the things, which you do. Still need a planner. But I learned the value of support.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Even though I had the community, like I built the community because I felt so alone. I'm going to be totally honest. I built the community for selfish reasons. I felt alone. I didn't know anyone who was working homeschooling, not a single person. When I was going through all that, I didn't have one person in my life offline where I could say, this is what I'm going through. I need help. Because nobody understood it. Like they had no idea what I was going through. And so I started my business because I was like, okay, my business was my self-care. It taught me, I got to learn all kinds of things because I didn't know anything. And I built the community because I wanted to find one other person who got it. And I've always said it's really nice to have this place to hang out, but I didn't understand the true power of community and support and the importance of that until the pandemic. And it was like, it's like out of the three things, I think you need support, systems, and tools. But if you can only pick one, find one person, whether it's online, offline, local, a family member who understands whatever it is you're going through, who you can say, I'm having a bad day, and they don't say, quit work or,
Yes.
you know, whatever,
Hmm.
but they just listen. Sometimes that's all we need. We need someone to listen and say, you're going to be okay. Tomorrow's a new day, right? You
Hmm.
get to start all over again. Someone who is maybe doing what you're doing so that they understand. But yeah, so that was like, there's some good things that have come out of, um, COVID. I know there's a lot of negative things, but that has been a big thing. Oh, and we finally got online shopping here. So I'm super excited.
Oh my gosh, I never
We
even
didn't
thought
have
about
it.
that. That is so exciting for you. That was something too with here, even though I do not live as far out as you live, but where we moved a few months ago, we are about 20 minutes away from a small town, basically. Um, and we live where we live now is actually about 5 minutes away from my sister-in-law. So we're very close to her. So she could not, before the pandemic, she could not order groceries. She could not
Mhm.
get like DoorDash or anything like that. And man, that pandemic hit, and you better bet that Costco and Kroger are delivering out here now. And I'm like, well, thank goodness, because I wouldn't have functioned.
Yeah, that was like a huge, because people always talked about like ordering groceries online. No, so from town, we're only about 15 minutes from town. Our town is kind of small, but you know, by the time you pack up the kids and you go and you get walk through all the aisles, I mean, I take my mother-in-law who is elderly, so it takes time. It's nice. We get to spend that time together. But it's a good afternoon. It's like a couple hours to grocery shop. So
Yes.
when online shopping came, I was like, heck yeah, we're trying that.
Yes.
Like, look at this. I can pull up. They put the stuff in my trunk and they tell me what substitutes they made and whether I want them or not. And I say sure or no. And then I drive away and I pick up my coffee on the way home and I'm good to go.
Oh my gosh. The coffee though is vital, let's be honest.
Absolutely.
Oh man. All right. So, okay. One last question. Well, sort of one last question. Then we have one. Okay. One last question for you is, what advice would you give to a mom? I guess you kind of said the first thing would be support, but is there any other like super important advice that you give to mom who is working and would like to homeschool, but just doesn't know like where would she start?
Okay, so I always struggle with this question because I'm like, do I start with the working side or do I start with the homeschooling side? Because you have to make them mesh. And my number one piece of advice, besides all the like support system and tools, is to understand that you are a working mom who is homeschooling. Because what's going to happen is you're going to start scrolling through Pinterest or Instagram or whatever, and you're going to find all these hashtags like, this is what homeschooling looks like. And it's going to be these beautiful photos of like moms sitting and reading, and the kids are like behaving. And I want you to know that is totally possible, but it's also a snapshot. And that is not what life looks like. So, take those pictures, get inspired, but realize that you are a working mom. So when you're choosing curriculum, don't find curriculum that's going to take 8 hours a day because you don't have 8 hours a day. So ask a working mom who is homeschooling what they're using, or read reviews that say how much time it takes from mom. I think as moms, when we're making choices, because when you start to homeschool, you have to find your legal. Every state, every province has their own requirements. So you want to start
Yes.
there. If you're already in public school, you're going to want to de-school. But then they always jump into curriculum. And often they pick this beautiful curriculum that they just don't have the mental time and energy for. We always budget our money, but we have to budget our time and our energy as working moms because they're limited. And I don't want moms totally burnt out at the end of the day. I know what that feels like and it sucks. So don't do it. So yeah, just remember who you are and what you really want for your family. And don't be afraid to make mistakes. I promise you, you are not going to screw up your kids for life. I promise you. And if you jump into homeschooling and you decide, I can't do this, you've already got your support system and tools, and you decide, you know what, this isn't right for our family, it's okay. It's okay to put your kids back in public school. It's okay to put your kids in private school. It's okay to hire a tutor. It's okay to bring people in to help. In fact, I encourage you, find something to help you teach your kids, whether it's online, in person. Even people who have their kids in public school, they learn horseback riding, often not at public school, but at personal lessons. They get piano lessons, you know, get help. If you can hire a maid, send them to me. Um,
Right?
I could take one of those. But like, get help. And I know that's not one thing, but it's so hard to just say one thing. So be okay. Be okay with being human. Be okay with making mistakes. Be okay with not knowing the answers. And be okay. Just
Yeah.
like find your support system.
Oh, I love that. That's so important. Um, and so I know that you probably have resources too that could help them. So where could they find you and your resources, just so everybody knows? And I'll put them in the show notes too.
Okay, so I would recommend to start with my site. It's practicalbydefault.com, and it's all about, supporting working moms as they balance kids, career, and homeschool. So you'll find tools and systems about all of that stuff there. And then join my free group on Facebook. It's a lot of people think that they're alone, and there are currently 23,700 working moms.
Wow.
It is
Amazing.
it's a worldwide group. So I want you to know that, because if you're looking for specific help for, say, did you say you're in Kentucky?
Yes.
Yay! You want to join a Facebook group for that state, because they'll be able to help you with very specific things.
Hmm.
And you'll be able to find co-ops and group ups that are specific, but also join a working mom homeschool group. And that's because these moms, some of them been homeschooling 22, 25 years. Some are brand new. No question is like too simple to ask. I mean, we get questions all the time. It's a great place to ask questions. The only thing that I do want to warn you is you will get flooded with answers usually. So you will get like 32 answers on how to teach your child how to read. And that's because there's no one way to do it. So,
Yes.
you're looking for inspiration, encouragement, that type of thing. So that's where you can find me and my free resources. I do have a smaller paid membership for Coffee Club. It's the Working Mom Coffee Club, that you are more than welcome to check out. But I would recommend starting there and
Okay.
then seeing where you really need help and how we can help and support you.
Yes, that's awesome. And yeah, and you're right, that community aspect and the support, it's just so important. And
It is.
just knowing that there are other people who have the same issues, like it's
Mhm.
just mind blowing. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Um, so all of those links are going to be in our show notes so that you guys can find those things. And I will end this week with, there's a thing that I've started to do where we talk about a productivity hack of the week. And so since you're here, I would love to know, what is your favorite like mom time saving hack?
All right. So I usually only share this inside my paid group,
Ooh,
but
okay, we're getting good ones in.
this is a planner. So if you use a planner, you know how everyone says, how do you get everything done? And every working mom knows you don't. At the end of the day, you will have at least one thing that didn't get done, that still needs to get done, say by the end of the week. So I recommend using a buffer box. Have you heard of a buffer box?
I haven't heard of a buffer box. I'm so excited
It
about this.
it might be named something else. So it's not like an original, well, it was a new to me idea like years ago, but I find most people don't know about it. So you keep intentionally a block of time, you get to decide how long, empty. That's a little bit closer to the end of your week.
Mhm.
So for me, I keep it in Thursday afternoon between my Facebook lives that I do in my group and my work in the morning. So I have about a 2 hour block, and I keep that empty. And that is purposely left empty for whatever I didn't get done on, say, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So at the end, I just take those and I move them into that block. So, for
Mm.
example, if I have to write like a newsletter and I didn't get it done Monday and it's going out Friday, I move it in Thursday, and now it's a top priority during that time. And the great thing is, if you don't, say you're like superstar that week, you're really good at your priorities, you manage your time, and it's empty, then you get like 30 minutes to an hour of me time. You can go have a
Yeah.
shower, you can like watch a movie, or you can finally fold the laundry if that's your thing.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Oh, I love that. That's
that
such
is
a good idea. Yeah. I think I haven't done that before. My time is kind of, I have a catch-all time that I'm trying to put in at the end after my kids go to bed. I'm giving myself 30 minutes of catch up, and then I have to quit, and then I have to go do like whatever I want to do.
mhm,
So instituting that for me has been really good. But man, I can
yes.
totally see how a block, like a good block of time. Oh, I love that. That's such a good one. Thank you, Jen. I really appreciate it.
It's like such a simple, I love simple ideas that are so
Mhm.
practical, obviously. Practicality is my thing. So if you can use it, for me, practical is something you can use that makes your life easier. And so it really removes that guilt. How many times at the end of the day we're like, oh, I didn't get anything done. And we really did get all the things done, but this one thing is like, I didn't do me. And so we like take that guilt. But if we can just move it over into that block, we don't have to worry about it. And I'm like, look at this. I got everything done that needed to happen. And
Heck
it's
yeah.
great.
I
Yeah.
love it. I love it. Thank you so much for chatting with me today, Jen. This was so much fun. I'm so glad we got to actually get together to do this. I know we had tried a couple weeks ago and I was sick. So I'm so glad that we finally got together to do this. I think everybody's really going to love this stuff. Thank you so much for listening to this week's podcast. It was seriously amazing to talk to Jen. And I don't know how I'm going to follow this one up, y'all. But next week, we are going to have an awesome show. Next week, we're going to talk all about tips for being a work-at-home mom. So right here in this vein that we talked about this week, next week, I'm going to give you all my tips and all the things I've discovered that really help you be productive as a work-at-home mom and keep that sanity, right? That's important. So thank you so much for listening today. Make sure to rate and review the podcast. It really helps. Thank you so much to those who have done it already. And give yourself a little bit of grace and a lot of that coffee this week. Bye.